Now your mix might be falling apart in ways that you don't even realize. Maybe you've noticed that some parts sound weaker on a Bluetooth speaker, or your synths feel hollow in mono, or your volume balance just sounds kind of off when you're around the corner from the room. Now here's what's going on. Your mix is probably too wide. Most synth presets, loops, and reverb plugins are wide by default, often way too wide. It sounds cool in your headphones or right between your speakers, but it quietly wrecks your mix's power, presence, and mono compatibility. And barely anybody talks about this. So in this video, I want to show you the hidden problem with ultra-wide sounds, how to spot it yourself, and how to fix it, even without needing to buy any special third-party plugins. Now, this is something I see all the time when students first join our school at basskleph.com, but once you learn how to handle it, your mix downs will sound tighter, stronger, and way more pro everywhere. But why listen to me? Well, I've toured 33 countries, had multiple #1s on Beatport, signed hundreds of records to the world's top labels like Armada, Spinnin', Toolroom, Defected, as basskleph and Analog Soul, and since 2016 I've been helping producers like you finish great songs fast and get a pro sound. So what is a stereo phase issue? The short answer is it just means your instrument is too wide. I'll do a full, more detailed scientific explanation at the end of the video if you're curious. But why should we be concerned about these things? Well, the problem these stereo phase issues cause, they cause volume drops and EQ drops as well. So when people hear your song the way you've perfected it in stereo, when they hear it in mono, some parts will drop in volume. Some parts will drop in EQ. They might go darker instead of being bright. And volume and EQ are our two most important tools when it comes to mixdowns. They're the things we really need to nail to make sure our track sounds amazing. You could do loads of incredible work with multiband compression, reverb, and all sorts of stuff, but if your volume balance is off, your mix will sound terrible. So why would we ever do anything that negatively is going to mess up our volume balance? So let's jump into the DAW and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I've got two versions of a track here, one that I've labeled good and one that I've labeled bad in terms of stereo. Let's hear the bad one first. Nice and wide, right? But let's hear the good one now. A lot of parts feel kind of similar levels. Now, you need to be hearing this in stereo for this to make sense. If you're listening to this in mono, you might have already noticed the problem. But we're going to check it now in mono for anybody who has been listening to this on headphones and hearing it in stereo. Let's do that same test again. I'll go from the good one with everything in mono, and then we'll go over to the bad one. Did you hear all those parts drop in volume so much? Let's do that again. This time I'll start with the bad one and then we'll go to the good one. Big volume difference, right? Some of those parts are changing in volume 3 to 6 decibels or more. So this is the problem. It messes with our volume balance like this. Sometimes it'll even make the EQ dip down as well too, but we also just demonstrated how to spot it. That's the most easy way to do it. The most direct way is using your mono plugin on your master bus. If you switch your mono plugin on and some of your parts get quieter, it's almost certain that they're too wide. By the way, if you're digging these tips, drop a like and comment to let me know. Then I can keep sharing more of what you actually want. All right, let's look at the second way to spot it, and that's using some analyzers. I'm going to pull one up here. This is Melder's stereoscope, and let's play this sound. And you can see here on this width meter, it's saying that we're going past 100%. And that's one of the big warning signs here. We're going to show you a few other ways to check this as well. This is kind of a correlation meter. But when we go past this 100%, there is actually a point where it becomes problematic. Now, bonus tip, it's really important that you do this one sound at a time. If you try to measure this with the whole song playing, it takes the average. So it will take the mono sounds and mix them with the stereo sounds, and it might tell you everything's okay when it's really not. Let's pull up another one. This is Vision 4X, and down the bottom right, it's got a correlation meter as well. You're going to see, watch this line here. Ooh, it's already just buried in the bad. So anyway, this is going from +1 over here up to 0, up to -1 on this side. This is another way you might sometimes see these correlation meters displayed. When it's on 1, it's mono. When it gets to 0, it's acceptable stereo. It's not going to cause problems. When it goes beyond 0, heading towards -1, you're starting to get problems. If it gets all the way to -1, it is going to completely cancel out to silence. So watch that one and watch the other one I showed you. You can see them at the same time. Here's another one. This is Corello meter by Voxengo. And just like before, we've got correlation meters, but this time we have them for multiple frequency bands. So we can see the number 1 at the top coming down to 0 and then coming to -1 at the bottom. When we play our sound, we can see everything is buried towards that -1 area all across those frequencies. Some more than others. This one can be useful too. This is Tokyo Dawn's Prism. You'll notice there's 2 colors when I play that. There's the blue and the white. That's showing us the mids and the sides. The blue is the sides, the white is the mid, and TLDR, if the sides are louder than the mid, you're going to have a problem. If it's only sides, you're going to have a really bad problem. Now, many people still like this plugin Span. You can set it up on here as well too. On this one, I've got the sides set up as being red and the center being set up as white. I've got a few other tweaks on this one as well. All of these ones I've adjusted and made my own presets for. By the way, if you want to download my presets I made for these analyzers, I'll leave a link in the description below. So there you go. To spot it visually, you're either going to see a correlation meter that's going past 0 towards -1 or going beyond that 100% width amount, or you might see it on one of these spectrum analyzers where the sides are louder than the mids. More importantly, let's talk about how to fix it. So there's a few different ways. Let me show you the easiest one first, and that's to simply load on a utility plugin and start reducing that width. So let's do that, and I'll have these analyzers up here so you can see that happening. See, when I pull it down to 0%, this one here is hitting all on number 1, all green up the top there. This correlation meter is down over on number 1. This one's down on 0% wide. Let's restart increasing that width until we get to a more sensible level. So probably around about there, it's probably enough. But that's according to the meters. So let's double check with our ears too, because that's the most important thing. To do that, we can just load another utility plugin and turn the mono switch on and off to see how it sounds. Well, what we're listening for again is it should be the same volume, whether it's in stereo or mono. We shouldn't notice the volume drop when we go to mono. Much better. So let's take a look at this in a more real-world scenario. I've taken that same sound and put it back into my good mix that is mono-compatible. And when we turn that on with that width adjustment, narrowing it in like that, it's going to make it feel a little bit quieter. Check this out. So if you're trying to fix a sound like this and you're narrowing it in, you're going to need to add some volume back in. So let's play it and turn up the gain. I might even narrow it a little bit more as well too, until it feels the same volume, whether this is on or off. All right, I ended up landing on about 28% width and 7 decibels of gain compensation. So let's turn it on and off, and you're going to hear when it's turned on, it's around about the same volume as the wide one, but it's more mono-compatible. Now, if that's not immediately obvious, let's turn on a mono plugin afterwards and hear what this would sound like when we turn it on and off. That's how much volume you're losing on this part. And this can easily happen to really important parts like your bass, your lead, your vocal. They could be dropping 7 decibels or more in your mono versions of your mix. So this is one way you can fix your sounds if they're too wide and you've already been mixing in stereo. But here's the thing, if you've been mixing in mono since the beginning and you only just took the mono plugin off your master bus to have a listen to it, then rather than these sounds dropping in volume, they're going to feel like they jump out louder, which makes it easier to notice. This is why one of the many reasons why I recommend mixing in mono in the first half of the mixing stage. So in that case, you wouldn't need this boost. You would simply just adjust the width so that the stereo version matched your mono version. Now, if this is starting to make sense and helping out, then hit subscribe, because then you'll get more real-world mixdown tips that actually work and not just YouTube myths and overcomplicated nonsense. All right, let's talk about the second way to fix this problem, and it's the best way, really. It's to fix the problem at the source. So by that, I mean, go back through your signal chain of plugins and synthesizers, find where this stereo width is occurring, and dial it back or remove it right from the beginning. So for example, if you're using a stereo widener plugin or expander, try turning that down first and try and get that into the right spot. Even many reverbs and other effects have width controls on them too, and sometimes the presets set them too high, and you can just dial them back. You can also get this problem a lot with synthesizers, so I want to show an example of one that happens with Serum quite often. Here's the overly wide version. And here's the corrected version. Now let's put everything in mono and hear the same two again. Bad one. Good one. You hear how the bad one sounds kind of mushy and quiet, and the good one, even in mono, cuts through and has clarity and power. So a couple of things you can look at in Serum specifically is the unison mode of your oscillators. Too many presets often use way too many oscillators and too much unison, but don't get me started. But there's one thing you can do here on Serum 2 as well, where you hit this button and you can come over and you can dial back the width of the detune spread. By default, it's on 100, but many times you probably only really need like 40 to 50. Now, if you have Serum 1, you can access the same thing by going into the global menu and you'll see a unison width control there as well. The next thing you can do is change the unison amount from something like 2 or 4 and change it to an odd number, because then you're going to get an oscillator in the middle and you can then blend between that stable middle one and the detuned wider ones on the sides. That's also going to help you get some stability and monocompatibility. Aside from that, definitely go and check out your effects section, because things like chorus and hyperdimension can make things way too wide. So go and check if you're using them, if they're already in the preset, if you didn't make it. Check the mix levels on them and how many they're using. Turn things off in general. Way too many Serum presets. People are doing way too much stuff that they just don't need to be doing. Unnecessary things. Now, bonus tip, here's a slightly more advanced thing that you don't need all the time, but it might come in handy sometimes, and that's frequency-specific stereo adjustments. So let's take this snare part for an example. You can see from my meters that it's way too wide. So the first thing we're going to do is just pull back the width overall with our utility. Because this is just a loop. We don't have any other controls. But you might notice there's one frequency that really still jumps out a lot. See the blue above the white there? The side's louder than the mids. And you can see it sticking out here on Corello meter as well. So in this case, you can potentially come and take a mid-side EQ and just pull down the volume of the sides at that specific frequency. That way we can avoid these strange EQ differences from when we hear the mono version versus the stereo version. Quick warning though, I don't recommend you do any mid-side EQ on your master bus. It can cause a lot of problems to your stereo field is the short answer, but it's not too bad to do on individual channels if you absolutely have to. Now, I've already explained the importance of making sure your volume balance is good in every scenario, but you might be asking yourself, when will people actually hear this stuff in mono though? Well, many phones are still mono, many Bluetooth speakers, even some club systems are still wired up in mono. And even if these things are set up in stereo, often the speakers are close together or in bad positions. And unless you're perfectly between the speakers, you're not going to hear the stereo effect. Even if you're just outside and around the corner from your studio, you're going to get some kind of monoing, some kind of phase cancellation. Maybe not the same as a mono plugin, but at least partial. And I don't know about you, but I definitely don't want anything to mess up all my hard work balancing my volumes and doing my EQing. But hey, you might also be thinking, oh, my favorite famous producer makes stuff crazy wide. What's wrong with that then? Well, here's the thing. Even a lot of famous producers make mistakes too. So take influence from the good things they do, not the bad. Here's a good way to think about it. Making your mix down over the top wide is kind of like making a bad movie, but in 3D, and only giving a few people the 3D glasses. So don't sacrifice a good mix just to make it super wide, because no one ever stands in the club saying, wow, that sounds so wide, man. No, they care about the bass and the balance and how powerful it is and how clear it is, not how wide it is. So a safe and acceptable amount of stereo is plenty. We don't need to go beyond that. Now, if this video helped you catch a problem that you maybe didn't even know you were making, just imagine how much faster and better your music could get with the right guidance. If you're tired of guessing your way through YouTube tutorials or trying to figure out everything all by yourself, and if you're ready to finally finish tracks that sound amazing, quickly, confidently, and without second guessing everything, then you should definitely check out my courses and mentoring at basskleph.com. I'll show you the exact system I use to help producers go from stuck and frustrated to finishing fast and sounding pro every single time. All right, I did promise you a scientific explanation of why and how this happens. So if you're still with me, awesome, let's check it out. So I got to explain a few things to make this understood. And the first is phase cancellation in general. So there is a thing that happens when you take one sound and you duplicate it and you flip the phase upside down, they cancel each other out. Like we could take this sine wave, duplicate it, and flip the phase upside down. You'll see how it's a mirror image now. And now if we play these starting with one and then together, it completely cancels out and just disappears. This is kind of like how your noise cancelling headphones work. They have little microphones on the outside that listen to all the noise, and they pipe that sound back in, but with the phase flipped upside down. Now, sometimes you'll see this inverted phase referred to as 180 degrees, because really what's happening, it's a time delay. If we line these things back up, that's more or less in phase. And once we get over to this spot here, it's more or less out of phase, which is 180 degrees. and then we get back to 360. Now, the next thing to explain is what is mono and what is stereo. Mono is when the same sound is coming out of both speakers. This makes it feel like it's kind of in the middle. And it's also why I could take two sine waves that are in phase, pan one to the left and the right, and it wouldn't sound wide because they're exactly the same. Now, to have something feel stereo, there just needs to be some difference between the left and the right speaker. Now, that could be phase, time, which is kind of the same thing, pitch, or other movement or something else. So for example, if I move this over here, I'm changing the phase. I'm also changing the time offset between the left and the right speaker, and it's going to make it feel stereo. Versus if we put it back, totally mono. Now you'll notice that the more I change the phase and keep pushing this closer and closer, it's getting wider until eventually it starts going out of phase. Because you can see the waveform starting to drift out there like that and starting to cancel out completely. And when we hit mono, it completely goes silent. Now, this is kind of a trick that happens with our ears because when we have two sounds that are out of phase, you already know that they cancel out and completely disappear. But when we pan one just to one speaker, one just to the other speaker, then one is heard by the left ear, one is heard by the right ear. And it kind of sounds like stereo, I guess, because they are different. They're completely different, really. But you also get this weird sense of nothingness in the middle, this phantom center, we sometimes call it. And if you move your head around or if you're not perfectly within the speakers, you're going to notice a difference in volume of that as well. And absolutely, if for some reason it's played back in mono, it's going to completely disappear. So this is why when something is even only partially out of phase, that it drops in volume a certain amount when we hear it in mono. Now, for those paying close attention, you might have noticed that when I put things completely out of phase, we only got sides. We only got -1. Let's bring it up here on the analyzer. See how there's only blue? There's no white? So this is the reminder and the proof that when we put something into mono, anything that has been measured as sides or the difference between the two speakers will completely disappear. That blue stuff always disappears in mono, basically. So if we want our instruments to sound the same volume in a mono environment as in a stereo listening environment, then we can't have our sides, or the difference, louder than the mids or the sum. Because that middle sum bit, the white bit, that bit stays there no matter what. The mono bit, you hear it in stereo, you hear it in mono. The blue bit, the sides or the difference, you only hear in stereo, and in mono, that completely disappears. So if you're using these analyzers like I've been showing you, you can use as a rough guide to just make sure that your sides are not louder than your mid. I'd even normally recommend you don't go equal. I'd normally have my sides a little bit quieter as well, just in case. But the best way to check is by listening. Use that mono plugin, switch it on and off. Make sure it doesn't have a noticeable jump in volume. All right, more mixdown and producer tips are coming up next week. So if you want real answers that actually move your music forward, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And let me know in the comments, what's the one thing you're stuck on in your music right now? I read them all, and your question might become the next video. So until next time, you know what to do. Less tweaks, more tracks, own your sound.